is back on the mic, and the sky is the limit as Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua proclaims the government of the Republic of Kenya a private company that should serve only its shareholders. And he promises to vet the queue of shareholders to measure the shareholding down to the last strand of loyalty. We assess the Gachagua tapes for the first time here on NewsGang. And the decibels at the Senate chambers were declared unhealthy for the eardrums of the youth. And an evacuation of students preceded the suspension and then readmission of 4 senators as the House majority and House minority scrambled for the leadership of the House minorities. And the scramble for the CAS slots begins with former governors leading the pack of political job seekers. We read out that list line by line. Jamila's memo will barely hold back tears over the drought situation. Gachagwa's punchline punches at the stench over the Senate dispatch box. Kaikai's kicker kicks out the lies and austerity measures. And my take, there are no substitutes to paying up those pending bills. The News Gang is here.
So nyinyi watu ya media muende muandike hiyo nimesema, hakuna pahali mtatupeleka, mlijaribu kutupiga, mkiwa na system, mkiwa na deep state, mkiwa na Azimio na Gideon Moi, tukapiga nyinyi 9-0. Hata hapo mbele tutamulima the same. Na sisi hatuogopi nyinyi. Kama hatukuogopa Uhuru na system na deep state, watu ya magazeti tutaogopa nyinyi? Muache hiyo maneno mko nayo.
All right, so that and much more, the Gachagua tapes on the show tonight. Ladies, gentlemen, good evening. It's good to be here. But before we get to the Gachagua tapes in a moment, let's just talk about this just in the news that broke this evening of the major changes at the Kenya Revenue Authority. Gachuri, this is big. 4 commissioners are out?
Actually,
4 plus the Commissioner General, yes.
It's a huge sweep, but no surprise. It was coming. It was imminent. If you remember some time back at the KICC, President William Ruto told the Commissioner General, together with other senior members of the Commission, that there were a number of issues that he had with how KRA was operating, and that if they don't change, he would change the Commission himself. And those changes have come, and they were preceded by a change in the board. You remember?
Yes.
From the new chairman, Anthony Mwaura.
A new member.
And new members. And actually the new members came in, I think, 2 weeks ago or thereabout, and the first order of business was to kick out the Commissioner General and the 4 commissioners. And the narrative of we have received the resignation. Nothing like that, in my opinion. It is euphemism for we have sacked, not we have received resignations. You remember the Kinoti story? I have received the resignation later on. That's why I sacked this man, Kinoti. So the changes at KRA, no surprise at all. And it is important to note that the people who have been removed were very strategic in terms of operations at KRA and were key members in the last administration of retired President Uhuru Kenyatta. And you remember the accusations that were leveled against them, harassment of business people and so on and so forth, even though there was a bit of politics that infiltrated that whole taxation question. Now, hopefully, the new team members will carry over the responsibility of, one, making sure that taxes are collected effectively, loopholes are sealed, and the targets are met. Because those are some of the accusations that the previous team was accused of. So let's hope the changes will be for the better. And of course, the whole process of recruiting the Commissioner General kicks in. And I will not be surprised that many other similar organizations and institutions will face what we have seen at KRA today.
Yeah, but you know, what's also interesting is the changes that have been made at the KRA, starting with what happened at the board, including some of the additions to the board, people who had themselves had, you know, some cases with the KRA.
Absolutely.
You remember Mary Wambui, who had been charged with tax evasion in a case valued at 2 billion shillings. That case was withdrawn, and then she got onto the board. Anthony Mara as well, although his case was not to do with KRA, but had all these other issues. And it also comes on the back of many other tax cases, which we are now told, were politically instigated, or so the Kenya Kwanza administration says. And so you can see where this is going. So cases are dropped. KRA, in fact, was urged to sit down and negotiate with persons who have issues, with their taxes, as opposed to going after them. So you're seeing a complete change of tactics in terms of how the taxes are collected, and particularly those who have issues. And you can see these changes happening, in less than a month after new people at the board, and then now the changes that are happening within KRA itself.
And the biggest victims are Commissioner General Githui Former,
correct,
and also Dr. Karanja, who was in charge of intelligence.
Yeah.
And you also notice that there are two departments that have been merged. The one that was headed by Saidimu Terra, and the other one that was also headed by Karanja.
Yes.
So they have been merged, and they will now be headed by, I think, Mitiego,
yes,
who previously was targeted in the other changes that were made. So quite a number of politics around it, but let's hope it is for the better.
Yeah, Linus?
Remember the pre-election mantra was freedom is coming. And early this month, we crossed the six-month mark. This administration is now heading into its 7th month in office. And these changes come as absolutely no surprise. This was coming. I should think that former Commissioner General, James Mburu Githui, must have known this is also coming. And look at how this has been received. I saw a social media posting by Tabitha Karanja, who sat here yesterday with Jeff, and she wrote that as you exit the stage to pave way for the new leadership at KRA, I wish to share with you my favorite Bible verse in the book of Matthew 7:12. Do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. To my friend Githui, I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. There's a lot of Bible quoting, which is typical of what has been happening.
But there is no love lost between those two, because there's been quite a tax battle between them.
Absolutely.
For years.
Yeah, for years,
right,
and including a time when Keroche breweries had to shut down because of tax evasion. Yeah. And one thing that should be said about Githui Mburu is he cut a reputation of a no-nonsense, not just tax collector, but internally also he was reputed as a person who really wanted the systems to work, and he also fought what many considered cartels within the KRA, where there are a lot of people cutting shortcuts, and he tried to tackle that. And this comes because of his background, having been in charge of investigation, and internally even he wasn't very popular because he was a strict manager and he knew all those loopholes, and he actually repeatedly made to fix those loopholes.
Yeah, Jamila, changes, huh?
Yeah, changes, Yvonne. And I think also the importance of KRA cannot be understated, considering the fact that I think the recent report showed that they had not met their targets that had been set for a few months. And of course, the government has talked about the importance of trying to save costs, the importance of having to collect the taxes and reach targets, because they have a budget that they're supposed to facilitate. And now with the changes that have been made, the president and the politics notwithstanding, there are changes that have been made in the KRA. We have a new acting director general, commissioner general. We have all these commissioners who have been appointed in acting capacity. Whether they'll be confirmed or not is a story for another day. But now they need to do the work at hand, which is collect taxes so that the government can fund its work. And I think, Yvonne, we should also talk about the other breaking news this evening as we continue, the fact that now there's a summons for former Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiangi is expected to be at the DCI headquarters on Kiambu Road tomorrow morning by 9:30, failure to which he is liable for prosecution prosecution. There was a whole document that we saw of the summons that were issued by a detective, Michael Sang, who's attached to the DCI Serious Crime Unit. The document that was requesting Mr. Matiangi to be at DCI tomorrow morning says that it's doing investigations against the former CS on allegations of false information, contrary to Section 23 of the Computer Misuse and Cyber Crimes Act of 2018. The notice says that there are other offences concerning the alleged invasion and raid at Dr. Matiangi's residence that supposedly happened on the night of February 8th to the early hours of February 9th. Remember, Yvonne, when that happened, of course, we saw all these politicians, Matiangi's lawyer at his residence, and of course, we had all these security agencies denying that any police officers or security agencies were at his home. And then a week later, of course, we saw them there. Yeah, plainly during the day, of course, they left collecting CCTV material, breaking the main gate of the former CS. We had Dunstan Omari, his lawyer, being asked to appear before DCI also to answer questions on the same. And of course, the Law Society of Kenya and other lawyers rallied around him and said this cannot happen. But then this is tomorrow for Matiangi. Will he show up or not at DCI to answer those questions? Remember, he has the anticipatory bail that was given to him. And of course, the High Court in Milimani today also extended the orders barring the police from arresting Dr. Matiangi until April 19th. Okay. So there's all this happening. He's expected to be there tomorrow. Will he be there or not? Will his lawyers represent him? He cannot be arrested, but he can be investigated. So I think it's a wait and see.
Indeed. Interesting things happening in the country on this day. So we shall see what happens tomorrow. Best believe we'll be there. Now, listen, serikali kona wenyewe, or so we've been made to understand. Let's take a look at what happens when the deputy president is handed the mic, and he is known to speak quite openly on matters he's particularly passionate about. I want us to, we heard about him speaking about the media. We'll get to that in a minute. But, right before that, he talked about wale walio...
Endelea tu.
Hapo ndio Kiswahili changu kimefika.
Ni which one? Ipi?
Ipi, ile ya UDA.
Serikali ya shareholders.
Kwa UDA lazima kwanza.
Haya basi tuende na serikali ya shareholders.
Ni kampuni na ni ya shares, si ndio? Ni ya shares. Kuna wenye kampuni, wale wako na shares mingi, kuna wale wako na chache, kuna wale hawana. Sasa nyinyi mliinvest kwa hii kampuni ya William Ruto na Rigathi Gachagua. Sasa lazima mvune. Yule ambaye alipanda atafanya nini? Si mlipanda? Si mliamuka mapema? Mukasema mutaki kusikia mambo ya ile system na nini? Muka invest, mukapanda, mukapalilia, mukaweka mbolea, mukamwagilia maji, wakati ya kuvuna ndio huu.
The time to reap is now, and if you did not sow, then you cannot obviously reap. The Bible says so as well, doesn't it, Gashuri?
Well, politics proper, yet again. What the deputy president was saying is not necessarily new. He only verbalized that which has happened over a period of time. Way back, even pre-multipartism and after multipartism, we've seen that. Particularly in the last two administrations, the last administration of Uhuru Kenyatta, 2013 to 2017, 2017 to 2022. The accusations then were that it was a coalition government of URP and TNA that later merged into Jubilee, Mount Kenya, Rift Valley. They were the biggest beneficiaries in terms of government appointments. So even without verbalizing it, it actually happened. The only issue now is that that which probably has been done silently, the deputy president is verbalizing it. And that is a serious concern. Yvonne, we've seen audits done by various organizations in terms of who dominates the public service. When you look at A basic thing like appointments. Look at the cabinet of 21 in the Uhuru administration and now in the Ruto administration. Look at the cabinet of 21. Look at the PSS. Look at senior positions that in terms of appointments. You will see that the trend basically. Whereas on one hand, the politics of it, the expectation would be that those who voted for one administration or the other would benefit. It is also expected that the Constitution requires that the formation of a government must reflect the face of the nation and must have proper regional balance. That being the case, it's normally a tight balancing act for the president to reward those who voted for you, but at the same time, to make sure that the government is as inclusive as possible. The tragedy is when you verbalize that exclusionist nature of forming government.
Well, there is the reality and there is, what we imagine should happen. But shouldn't we be at a point where we're saying, yes, naturally, people who worked with that administration, during the campaign period would get that. But at what point do we ever start to have a conversation about having people of merit? Because there's several people who are perhaps apolitical or, didn't stand up and campaign for this or that side. So is there no place for merit at all? Is that what we're saying? I mean, you have a point that, this is being verbalized and we know what happens, but it's never been said, but now it's coming out in the open. But are we now saying in Kenya today there is no place for merit in appointments? Is that what we're saying? Do we just accept that fact and we, winner takes all?
I don't think so. I think, in fact, we should admit that we are in uncharted waters. This is the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya. This is the person who is a heartbeat away from the presidency. He is basically on the doorstep of the presidency. Now, being in that position means you are holding a position that represents everyone in the Republic. Your constituency now is drawn up by the international boundaries that make Kenya. That is what it means to be Deputy President. That is what it means to be President of the Republic. I think we are in uncharted waters because no Vice President, no Deputy President, there's been one before, has ever gone in this direction of making what is clearly very divisive talk. How does Rigathi Gachagua expect to be treated in a place that voted, for example, for the opposition? We saw him going to Kisumu and speaking, this Kisumu and Siaya, he had a trip there.
Homa Bay, Siaya and Kisumu.
Yes, where he actually sounded like a national leader. He sounded like a person who appreciates that this is a multi-party system and not everybody who voted in August last year voted for Kenya Kwanza. But I think what is even more dangerous is there is an emerging culture of trying to pass this as normal politics. This is not normal politics. This is a decline in terms of leadership. It's a very, very serious decline because for a person that is that high to sound this way in a multi-party democracy, then we can't say this is normal times. And I just want us to go to Rigathi Gachagua speaking about the Shamba system not too long ago in somewhere in Baringo, so that we can just illustrate what seems to go on in the pattern here.
Wananchi wanapewa, wanalima mahindi, wanapalilia miti ikiwa kubwa wanaondoka. Mimi nasema hii serikali ni yenu. Tumetoa order wananchi wapewe nafasi walime msitu. Ndio tuongeze chakula kwa Kenya hii. Sasa iko haja gani kukataza watu kulima mahindi alafu tunaenda kutoa mahindi ng'ambo? Ni ujinga si ujinga? Ni ujinga si ujinga? Kwa hivyo tutatoa ratiba ambaye tutalima kwa msitu bila kuharibu miti, si ndio?
I think even sober UDA supporters sometimes shudder or cringe when they listen to the deputy president because he tends to say things that are over the top. They cross the line. Remember, on this issue of Shamba system, he had to walk back. And I wanted us to play that clip because in both cases, he was speaking in front of what he considers the strong base of UDA, those who voted for President Ruto and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. And my only theory is this is what tends to happen with politicians. When they see a crowd, the first thing they ask themselves is, what can I give them? This is a good crowd, what do I give them?
Or what do they want to hear?
Aren't we past that though, because you know, the campaign is over, you know.
And by the way, this is even on both sides of the political divide.
Yeah.
Even for the opposition, when you stand in a particular place where this is a stronghold of opposition supporters, that is when to sound. You have to maximize your rhetoric against government and all that. And Rigathi Gachagua tends to fall into this trap where in front of supporters of UDA, he says some things that are quite ridiculous, for lack of a better way of describing them. So much so that there'll be sober people within UDA itself that will step back and say, oh my, that was not in order. How can a government, a national government, be a private company? You know, if we were in a different democracy, say Western democracies, a leader that speaks this way, by now we'll be tonight discussing the resignation of Rigathi Gachagua alongside that of the KRA Commissioner General.
And it's true, Yvonne, because even what he said and the reaction it has elicited, not just among politicians, those for or against the government, but even among Kenyans, them saying, then kama hatukupigia kura basi tusilipe ushuru. We don't need to be paying taxes because we are excluded from this government. But now that exclusion, really, looking at the 6 million plus people who voted for the other side, really, that's a huge percentage, and you should think about what that really means when you say tumewaacha nje. And it's not like even after he said that ikaishia hapo. He spoke again. I don't know if we have the soundbite where he was speaking a couple of days later when he said the president is for the whole country, but he's just for UDA. Do we have that soundbite, Yashwari? I think we can look for it if we have it. And even after all the hula baloo, he still continued saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. And he said that Rais abakia wa nchi mzima, mimi nitakuwa watu wa UDA. But then that's another point. I think another bite we need to talk about something else that the deputy president spoke about, and it's what we are seeing on air now. This is in Kereko village in Rongai, Nakuru County. This was a couple of days back where the deputy president was on camera assisting in reconstructing of homes. That was houses that were demolished by an auctioneer who had orders from the court. Now, the court issued this order in a ruling over a long-running case of a land gashu. I think it's almost 30 years. And the evicted families had lost the case over the ownership of the land at the High Court, at the Court of Appeal, and at the Chief Magistrate Court. And that case was heard by, among others, Principal Magistrate Wendy Kagendo. It was heard by Justices Philip Waki, Martha Koome, Hannah Okwengu, and even former CJ David Maraga. And the ruling was made last year in April. So the police executed the order this year, which was supposed to have been executed anyway in June. But now the deputy president not only went against the court order, but ordered action against the former Nakuru County Police Commander, Peter Manzo, who is the one who deployed police officers to provide security during that incident on February 16th. I think we can listen to him talk about police don't obey court orders on demolitions until we discuss.
Na mimi nataka niambie polisi pahali popote waliko katika Jamhuri ya Kenya kwa niaba ya Rais William Ruto. Any police commander who will supervise eviction and demolition
without authority of the respective county security and intelligence committee, you'll be on your own. And I want the DCC here, you'll have to explain to us, when you saw this, what action did you take? Because by the time I called you a regional commissioner, he was not aware. Why didn't you report to your bosses of what is happening?
He's clearly said court orders be ignored. And I said this case has gone through different courts, different judges who have given that ruling. Yes, there were people living in that land. The court says they're supposed to be evicted, and they were. What does that mean about court orders? So should we obey those that favor us in one way or another? Because there have been court orders that have favored the deputy president. And now he's saying that one was okay, but we're ignoring this one. And the fate of now Peter Manzo, who was taken back to Vigilance House, is unknown after he was sacked for doing his job. And such a gaffe really paints a not so good picture, and also sets precedent in terms of, do we really need to obey court orders once they've been given by a court that has listened to a case for such a long time? And on top of that, really, those people who have been allowed to take back their land, ni kuwanyima haki yao, in terms of like, well, it doesn't matter whether or not the court has ruled this is your land. I have said, na imeishia hapo. I think this is not a good precedent that has been set.
Yeah, and considering, they have been the beneficiaries of court processes and court rulings. Primarily the Supreme Court ruling last year that affirmed their win, led to their swearing in, and they're now being in government. That was a court ruling. There was also a court ruling about, the corruption case against him, and his money was reverted to him by the court, and surely somebody was required to obey that court order and refund, was it the 200 million shillings that had been, confiscated by the Asset and Recovery Agency. So, there's quite a bit, that's happening here. But, this is, he speaks openly. Some would say maybe we're not ready for this type of politics and talk in our country, of somebody who says it as it is, none of that political correctness, and that maybe we should, get to the point where we're truthful and we're saying it as it is. And I think that was when he, talked about, those in the media, and he said, and he particularly said not just those in the media, but mainstream media, but social media as well, that that had a lot to say about him and his character, and that he's open, about things, and he's a truthful man. I'd like us to listen to him saying, watu wa media, najua mnalipwa. In fact, he talked about perhaps being influenced by a certain person. That was Rigathi, watu wa media, najua mnalipwa na yule mtu wa maziwa.
Kenya watajaji sisi. They'll say whether we know what we are doing or not. Your opinion is not necessary, and we don't bother about it, because we know who pays you. Kama sasa magazeti wameshikwa na hii makatele ya kahawa na majani chai na maziwa. Kwanza mtu ya maziwa ndio nalipa hiyo hati ya magazeti. Si mnajua katele ile mtu ya maziwa? Si mnamjua? Na ni mimi na hawa hii watu wanaiba pesa ya maziwa. In another 3 months mtaanza kuuza maziwa mzuri. Hiyo cartel tumesema tunajua ni wapi. Hawa ndio wenye kulipa hiyo hati ya magazeti. They try to demoralize me so that I get distracted from fighting coffee, tea, and milk cartels. My eye is on the ball. I am focused. Na ni mimi na nyinyi.
Well, put it this way.
And then also, as you're doing that, there was context to this.
Yes.
He was obviously irked by a story that was, I think it ran last night on NTV, and I watched it. So there's history there. But then, listen, maybe we should just say, look, this is a guy who says it as it is. He is open. He is not politically correct. He is not cultured the way you all want him to be. He is not proper. He speaks his mind. Maybe that's the refreshing thing we're all looking for in this country, Gachagua?
But I also think he has a personality that many people probably don't understand, because I've had an interaction.
You've interviewed him twice.
Yes, twice, several times.
Okay.
Even before he became deputy.
Yeah, but twice as DP, right?
Yes. And truth be told, he's a very sharp politician, and generally he's a sharp person. When you engage him one-on-one, he's a major departure from what you hear in the public podium. And I think maybe he believes that style of doing things resonates with the public, resonates with the target audience. Because away from the major things that he has said about shareholding, tried to walk it back, the Shamba system, tried to walk it back, several things that he has said, and he has tried to walk them back. The blame is always on the media and the cartels. No surprise that even today in Gatanga, the issue was the media yet again and the cartels.
Milk cartels this time.
And milk cartels. And of course you can see where that statement was directed at, probably at the former president. Every time there's an uproar, and you see in the age of social media now and digital transformation in terms of how broadcast is conducted, you say something and it's likely
it goes viral. Yeah.
It goes viral very quickly.
Yeah.
So people will have heard what you have said and they will judge what you mean. You may try and contextualize it a little later, but it will be out there already. And that's why I support what LK is saying. Look, the audience every so often dictates what the politician will say, because you want to say what that which pleases the audience at that point. You want to tell them what they want to hear. You want to tell them you voted this way, so you'll be the major beneficiaries. When you go to the opposition side, for example, you heard what the deputy president said in Homa Bay. Actually, he spoke very well, said very nice things about the Azimio leader. But that was in Homa Bay. A few days later, in another place, which is a stronghold of the Kenya Kwanza team, he will say something that is completely opposite of which he said in Homa Bay. It's politics generally, and you will say that which your supporters want to hear at that point. But if you find yourself in a mess, maybe you misspoke, if there is a word like that.
There is no such word in Kenyan politics. You never misspeak.
So if you're
always misconstrued.
If you misspeak, then you must cite somebody for misquoting.
Get a boogeyman.
Yeah.
But do you realize, guys, you know, when we were all saying this, I just had this thing, we're talking like we're still in a campaign. Does that sound strange? Like when you have a crowd, we should say what they want to. I mean, what do people want to hear today? Like, bringing down the cost of electricity, you know, the cost of food. Does it feel like on both sides of the political divide today, we're still in this time last year? Like, what is this we're telling the crowd that they want to hear? I mean, I can't purport to imagine what the crowd wants to hear. Maybe I'll speak for myself, but I want to know about the cost of living. I want to know about why, you know, tissue paper has gone up by 500 shillings. I want to know about the cost of electricity. I'm concerned that, you know, the rains next month are likely to fail. Like, isn't that what we want to hear? Do we still want to hear open the server? Do we still want to hear hii serikali ni ya shareholders? Is that what we still want to hear? I mean, it's possible that it is, but, you know, I don't, but, you know, who knows?
It's not just about what we should hear, but it should also be about what we should see.
Yeah.
Visible manifestations of leadership. Again, I emphasize on this point of the gravity of the office. There's a big difference between being deputy president and being a candidate for office of deputy president.
A running mate.
A running mate. Yeah, because, you know, you're still in the campaign and really you do not have an office. But now, here you are, you're actually the country's second in command. Again, a heartbeat away from the presidency. And what that must do immediately is it imposes a certain code of conduct on you. And code of conduct is not just about how you carry yourself, but also how you speak, what you say. Because there is an implication to everything that you say. And Jamila, you earlier referred to the Nakuru incident. How do OCPDs, how do people who carry out court orders right now feel after the Manzo incident in Nakuru? Because you would expect that, hey, the deputy president will have a problem with this. And I want us to play, because this also came very early in the term, when he said that DCI officers should return to Kiambu Road and wait for crimes to be reported there. Let's just listen to this.
We have told DCI to go back to Kiambu Road and wait for crimes to be reported there. They have no business in government offices, hovering all over and creating a toxic environment for service delivery. We cannot have detectives in government offices because they poison the atmosphere and the environment for civil servants to deliver.
You see, there's an implication, especially on the morale of investigators, when the top leadership addresses them this way. And the human nature is to self-preserve. After this kind of talk, it shouldn't be surprising to find DCI officers just sitting in their desks and basically not waiting and not doing anything. Because I also think they push too hard. When you push them too hard, then even their motivation for the calling, for the job that they do, will also be affected because they'll be watching their backs. The human nature is to self-preserve, and especially in the civil service, where things are done by order as opposed to logic and justification. An officer will be very, very careful if this is the attitude of the second in command, because you don't want to be in trouble with your bosses. So again, the weight of office, when you speak, what is the implication and what is the impact on the officers that you are supposed to be oversighting?
Yeah.
Yes, you have the last word, and then we go for a break.
I look at it this way.
Yeah.
When you listen to the sentiments of the team in government and the team in the opposition, as you ask, are we still stuck in the pre-election campaign period? I would say yes, because on one hand, there's still, I want to use the analogy that Linus keeps using, the corner flag celebrations. The team that has scored a goal is still celebrating the goal, while the team that has conceded the goal is still attacking the referee.
Or challenging the ref,
Challenging
the goal
referee
wasn't,
and insisting the goal was not genuine.
Yeah.
And in fact, demanding a VAR or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's
exactly it.
That's where we are. You know, football fans
After the game.
That's exactly it.
would still understand where we are. And you see, the final whistle has been blown by the referee. The game is over. It's not like you will undo the goal and change the results. Because, I mean, the Supreme Court had an opportunity to hear this matter. So I would say that the Supreme Court was the VAR at that point. So the VAR said it was a goal. You will disagree or agree with the VAR decision. And that's it.
But the decision is
made. The final whistle has been
talked to the linesmen, everyone has contributed and said
and actually, the final whistle has been blown. So teams are supposed to actually walk out of the field, go and prepare for the next game or something like that. Yeah. But here we are. The winning team is still at the goalpost, showing the...
And the other side is still with the ref.
Yeah, so that's the kind of a situation that we find ourselves in. So what does that do? That takes away the serious content and discourse that should be going on in our country. That's why the cost of electricity is rising. It's not a major point of discussion at this point. Outside and inside Parliament, outside and inside government. Right. Even the opposition circles are not talking about it animatedly. You would expect that, for example, in the National Assembly and in the Senate, a member from Azimio would seek an adjournment motion to discuss the cost of electricity. You would expect that an opposition member today would cause an adjournment in the Senate to discuss the cost of or the pending bills, for example. There's some serious things that should be discussed at this point. But unfortunately, that is not the discourse. The discourse is still who won, who didn't won, who is legitimate, who is not legitimate, who is recognized, who is not recognized, and so on and so forth. Who is eating
and whose time, it's our turn to eat.
That is the discussion. Unfortunately, there's a danger that discussion can go on the whole of this year.
That's right, yeah.
Even next year. Before you realize what's happening, we're now preparing for another election. Yeah. So in the course of that discussion, you remember what we said in the punchline last week? That period between an election to another election, it's not a very interesting period for for the political class, because this is where the hard work is. This
That's
is where the roads are delivered.
Is,
this is where water is. This is where health is. This is where education is. But it will never be a major discussion. In fact, don't be surprised if the next dominant subject will be composition of the Electoral Commission. To do what? To prepare for the next election. What about the issues that people went to the ballot for in the last election?
There you go.
20 seconds, Yvonne. I remember during the swearing ceremony at Kasarani Stadium on September 13th, the president vowed to be the president of all Kenyans and said that the time for political campaigns were over. In fact, he said, I will work with all Kenyans irrespective of who they voted for. So the statement by the deputy president saying this serikali ni shareholding, watu wapange queue, wale tu wali support na nitawaweka mbele, is contrary to what the president said and promised back then when he was appointed and when he was elected and he was sworn in as president, because he has all these projects, he has all these promises that he made. And I think when he was making those promises during the campaigns, he was making those promises to all Kenyans, because he went all across this country. He didn't go to places that were deemed...
And there is nobody who campaigned harder
than the president.
Than President William Ruto. There is no corner of the country
that he didn't go, even places where he was perceived not to be his stronghold.
Right, he went there anyway.
And made promises.
Right.
Yeah, and that should be what we are seeing right now, that he promised and the delivery should be for everybody. Yeah.
That's a good place to take a break.
There's an economist friend of mine that I would want him to take us to a break. I will not mention his name.
Okay.
He says, the tragedy is our political class is definitely in a time trap. Ironically, a time when the economy is in a spiral.
Yeah, isn't it ironic? Let's take a break. But listen, there was drama at the Senate. There was drama. We'll talk about it when we come back.